Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line. Now this is his third feature film, and it's the last that I'll be reviewing on this, this director series, and then we'll be doing a ranking at the end, and that will be, based on my favourites, least favourite to absolute favourite. And you could probably see if you go through my reviews, you can get a rough idea of what I would, how I'd rank them. Not necessarily going to be, exactly the score, that I've given them, because that's more critical at times, but, you can get a basic idea of what it is. But it'll be within, a nice little video of just, where you can just go and you can see my thoughts overall, and I'll be doing like a conclusion, basically, at the end of the video. But yes, as I've said, Malick is, one of the absolute greatest directors of all time when he's at his best. He's had some misfires, really one or two recently, but I think basically if it was based on his first two films, which of course, as I've said, in my last couple of reviews, are my favourite Malick films, it was based on them, and he carried on making films as good as them two. Basically throughout the rest of his career, he would be my top 5 directors. I think he would have been probably better than Chaplin, better than, it could be rivaling Hitchcock, Kubrick, all these people, because what he done with his best two films, the 70s works, is almost unrivaled, especially my number one, Malick. Now, The Thin Red Line, of course, as I've said, I do absolutely love, because, I've said that before, based on the first three Malicks, he's a master, and of course The Tree of Life as well, I think is a masterpiece. Now, this is after his 20-year break, of course not quite that in terms of when he started, shooting the film, of course, but yes, to actually, between Days of Heaven and Thin Red Line release date, it was 20 years, so that's probably it could be the biggest hiatus, you could say, of a director, really, that's big, ever, really, and the fact that, so many people, was obviously talking about, Days of Heaven basically grew, in stature since its release at that time. People, and Badlands as well, of course, and people were just wondering, when's he going to make another film? And he returned with this, Thin Red Line. And once again, actually, like all of his films after, from this and after, it was controversial, you could say. It came out, the same year as Saving Private Ryan, which of course is much more of a straightforward, film with, made by Spielberg, and I think it's a masterpiece, to put it out there, Saving Private Ryan. But this came out in the same year, and they're two very, very different films, both war films, both epic in length and stuff, but this is much more of a, more like a poem, a visual poem, it's been described as that. Saving Private Ryan is more of a straightforward kind of war film. And, this is just such a unique film, I first saw it in January though, I was quite late in seeing this film, in January this year, and, I picked up the steelbook, which I'll quickly show. It's an absolutely stunning steelbook. Just take the disc out there, and you look at the inside artwork there, it's just stunning. And the front is great as well. The back's a bit plain, but yeah, great steelbook overall, and, an absolutely stunning film. It's of course a controversial film because it's one of the first ones where Malick would actually play around with the casting and stuff, as in a couple of people were actually cut from the film completely, and Adrian Brody, for example, was also reduced to a backdrop character kind of thing. But when you watch the film, and you kind of, since I rewatched it tonight, and it was even better than I remembered, and I already loved it. But you can kind of see, Malick knew what he was doing. He shaped it differently. He shaped it all really in the editing room. You could say, and whatever he started out with, I'm sure it's very different to how it actually turned out, because the main character, it really, you could say, the film, although there's not really, this has got a massive cast basically, massive cast. John Travolta, Nick Nolte. Adrian Brody, of course, he wasn't too big at the time, but you've got, so many, Sean Penn, John Cusack, John C. Reilly, Woody Harrelson, all these guys, and you've got Miranda Otto as well. She's kind of just in the flashbacks and stuff. You could say the main character really is played by Jim Caviezel, and he's, yeah, he's really throughout the film he is the main character. You know, you start off with him in these scenes, you know, in the South Pacific, where he's on this kind of island with his tribe, and him and one of his other friends are there, and they're just kind of, you know, at peace and stuff. And then very early on, you see the ships and everything, and he's picked up by, you know, Sean Penn and everyone, and kind of they're sent to this, you know, island. It's based on the you know, set in 1942, and it's this hill they have to take basically. Eventually, once they get on the island, but yes, you know, he's picked up on this boat, and yeah, basically after once the boat lands, you know, on the island, around about the 25-minute mark, you could say. From there on, you know, it's a pure visual war poem, and you know, it's something. When I first saw it, I was completely blown away. I didn't, you know, not quite know what I had seen. And you know, I've seen many war films, and of course, I wouldn't say this is the best war film or anything, but it's just still among all these war films I've seen, Apocalypse Now even, you know, and Saving Private Ryan, all these ones, Paths of Glory. It's a very unique. It stands out amongst them because it's Malick, I suppose. Of course, he's always unique, even if you know I don't like his films. You know, a couple of his films I don't like To the Wonder and stuff. They are different, of course, and this is a very different war film. You know, do not expect to see a you know, a Saving Private Ryan, of course. Very very different, and you know, a lot of it's narrated as well by Jim Caviezel, and you know, you've got some others like Nick Nolte narrating as well at times. But yes, it's much more. It's told a lot through visuals, of course, and you're just feeling, you know, it's just mood and everything. But it has got a lot of dialogue as well, and you could say even if this was the same length, you know, as his other films, because it is the longest one. If it was the same length, it would still have more dialogue really than the rest of his films, for the most part, because a lot of his films don't really have too much dialogue, and you know, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, with Malick, because he proves that can work. But yes, this has got a lot of dialogue in it, but it's times where it's just, you know, pure visuals, music, and everything like that, and just pure cinema really. And you know, once they get, you know, you're introduced to some of the most of the characters early on, the boat scenes and everything, and it's just, you know, wonderful. Really straight away got invested, and the first 10 minutes are very spiritual as well. I feel sometimes Malick can do very heavy-handed nowadays. You know, his first three in A Tree of Life, for the most part, really wasn't heavy-handed, and really earned the spiritualness. And just straight away, you know, Jim Caviezel, his character, just brilliant. You know, got invested in him, and it's just his eyes. You know, wonderful performance. You know, just his eye movement and everything, and his expressions are just so powerful. And he really doesn't have to say too much. He doesn't have too much dialogue in the film. As a lot of the other characters do, like Nick Nolte and stuff. It's just mainly told through, you know, just great acting, you know, of course, and you know, you can just always tell really what he's feeling. If you don't, you know, it's always intriguing. Just such a fascinating character, and all the characters really are memorable. Although this is very unique in the way that it's his biggest, you know, cast in the film, instead of, you know, in terms of all-star cast. And actually, if you really look at all the cast and you see where they are now and stuff as well, it's one of the biggest, you know, ensembles in cinema. But it's not really an ensemble, because there's never really a star, as you could say, of the film, apart from maybe Jim Caviezel, as I've said. All the characters are kind of just melded into this, into the landscapes and everything, and the actual, just this poetic narrative, and it's just so wonderful. When I first saw it, and today, you know, once I rewatched it, it's even clearer. You know, the cinematography in this film, I'll say it now, it's probably the best cinematography of 1998. Better than Saving Private Ryan, I would actually say, the cinematography, taking everything into account. Are the battle scenes better than Saving Private Ryan? Maybe. You know, I probably would still give the edge to Saving Private Ryan, but it's very close. The visuals on this, though, are better. The music is better on The Thin Red Line, and you know, it's not. I'm not trying to compare the two too much, but basically, you know, it's a shame that this kind of got overlooked at the time. You know, it's just the music. You know, Hans Zimmer, one of my favorite composers of all time, and one of his best scores actually. You know, it's always you know, so beautiful. There's times where it's quite haunting, and you know, when it gets into that middle of the film, one of the most epic pieces of you know, film scores I've ever heard, and used to perfection throughout the film. In the battle scenes, and particularly the charge, you know, when you see it, you'll know what I mean. And the centerpiece of the film, you know, way before the end of the film, it's kind of just before the 2 hour mark. And you know, I think it's called Journey to the Lion, that track, 9 minutes or so. It's just one of the most epic pieces of music you ever hear. And if you've probably heard it actually, if you've not seen the film, if you've not heard it, you've heard it in some way probably, because Inception, time is very very similar, and you know, same composer of course, and I think it's actually been recorded on record that it is basically a different version of, you know, the Thin Red Line score, and it's actually as well 12 Years a Slave. If you hear that soundtrack, very similar, but this was the original kind of, you know, version of that kind of that piece. It's just slightly been altered, and it's just mind blowing. And the way it's used in the battle scenes is wonderful. You know, really, just the way he elevates the battle scenes is something else, Malick. And as well, the battle scenes themselves. Now they are shot to perfection. They're also, you know, visceral, but you know, extremely controlled in the camera movements, graceful. You know, just the way that Malick directs the eye through pure cinematics, you know, it's just wonderful. And there's times where it's just, you know, kind of floating through the camera, but then there's grenades and everything going off, slightly stumbling, and it's just so perfect, you know. Really quite something, you know. Straight away I picked up on that when I first saw it. The way it's just it's perfect camera movements. The framing is on another level, you know, and just the way that Malick is able to give perspective and use the geography, or you know, the locations and stuff to perfection. You know, the characters, even just the shape of their helmets and stuff, the way he shoots it within, you know, the kind of hills and the landscape. You know, something that you may think is quite simple, but he's done it in such a, you know, a way that it's just really perfect. You know, always thinking, you know, exactly how everything's going to look. Just the framing throughout this film is perfection. The lighting is another level. You know, the actual angles that he's used for different effects to disorientate, masterful. You know, this is one of the best shot films of all time, and you know, that's quite usual with a Malick film. Maybe not Night of Cups and stuff. Certainly his first 5 films, even The New World, was really shot wonderfully for the most part. And you know, he's always got an eye for the visuals and stuff. You know, he always knows how to kind of make a film look beautiful and also just overwhelming as well at times. Nature versus man is another theme that's you know, in this film, and that's incorporated through the visuals as well. You know, the use of lighting and the different color tones. You know, it's beautiful, but it's also haunting in a way, and it's kind of overwhelming and harsh. And you know, just the way that this film builds and builds, and you know, it kind of quiets down in the last 20 minutes, you could say, or so, compared to the middle of the film. But it reaches a spiritual level that is, you know, quite unmatched almost in war films, most war films anyway. There's a couple that just go beyond this by far, but you know, for the most part, it's one of the most spiritual war films. You know, and just the way as well it invests you in the characters. Massive cast, but Malick is able to balance them in such a way. You know, the characters, but not really in a way where he gives you loads of character development for each characters. And he does it like that. They're kind of just part of this. It's so natural in the way that they're melded into this narrative, into the environment, really part of this poem. That yeah, that's why it just works so well, because you know, the characters aren't, you know, given massive character development basically throughout the film, but they're always compelling, for the most part, all of them. And you know, standouts really Jim Caviezel, of course, Nick Nolte, he's brilliant in this film, and you know, Sean Penn as well, especially towards the end of the film. Wonderful performance, really good character, and his, the relationship he has with Jim Caviezel's character as well. It's just wonderful, and just all the supporting cast, they give something. John Savage even, who's in The Deer Hunter, of course. Even he, he's a very very minor character, but when he's in it, he's stand out as well. But it never loses sight of the bigger picture. This is a massive film in scope. It's just really on the one island though, and it's quite remarkable how much, all the different themes that Malick explores, of course, as well, just how war can change people. Although it's not, set over massive time, it covers a massive, ground in terms of its scope, the themes he's exploring, and just all of the characters, just yeah, it's just so perfectly balanced. The script, of course, written and directed by Malick again. The script is stunning. It's poetic, but it's real. It's very human. The script, and obviously, it never loses, sight of that realism and that rooted, reality, the groundedness, and the narration in this film is wonderful. Of course, it does. It's not always, exactly clear narration like Badlands, just relating to what's going on. It is stuff that is more poetry as well, but it never loses. He never loses sense of basically reality in this film. It's a perfect blend, really. The script as well is, at times it's so moving, and just so, it's, some of the lines, especially the scenes with Sean Penn and stuff, and Jim Caviezel, really just so moving, so human. And this film is thoroughly human throughout. Everything. The way that Malick handles, just portrays life and death, so wonderful. It's perfect, and just all of the way that people fall and everything. It's poetic, but it's very sincere as well. Just the way he reaches a level that is just so powerful in terms of the elevation, the way it elevates you, basically. It's just wonderful. And combine everything, the cinematography, the editing, all the fades, and just the way the action's been put together, stunning. It's got a constant flow, perfect flow throughout the film in terms of the editing, the pacing. It kind of just lulls you in to this gradual pace. Never loses. It's more of a gradual pace, of course, than say it's Badlands. But when the pace is consistent like this, it works wonderfully. It just immerses you into the film. The sound design as well, everything. It just immerses you, and it never lets up. Even if the ending parts aren't quite as explosive and stuff, it just never loses. I never got detached or anything. And even though there's loads of nature shots and everything, he never loses sight of the actual characters and the story, the narrative. It's a perfect film, really. The first sort of 20 minutes and stuff. Really when they're on the boat and everything, it's nowhere near as good as the rest of the film, but it's not really got flaws or anything. It's just the fact that the film really, once they get on the island, or they're starting to prepare for that, it's just one of the most mind-blowing war films you ever see, really. And it's not a flawed film really for me. It's just it picks up after that 20 minutes, and it goes beyond really what you thought the film could be, because I didn't think, basically on the first 20 minutes I didn't quite think it'd be as mind-blowing and a film that elevates as much as this, as it did, and it certainly did. It's just an absolutely stunning film. I don't think it's his best film, of course. I think there's two films in particular that are better than this, that he's made. As I've said, Badlands, Days of Heaven. But really, this is a masterpiece, for sure. A true masterpiece of cinema. One of the best war films, really, of all time, and just so poetic, but so human. Just the way that it flows, it's got such a flow to it, a grace, just sincerity as well. But it's shocking stuff, brutal film, of course. And the action scenes are so perfect, they're so mind blowing. It's so visual. It looks like it's happening. Just like Saving Private Ryan. It's quite something that these came out in the same year, and I don't really like to compare them. Both are really quite flawless. But yes, just it's visceral, the action, but it's also, you know, poetic and stuff. And the way this film has been shot and edited is masterful. And just all the characters, the acting performances, you know. I'm glad though that Adrian Brody was not the main character, because you know, he was probably one of the weakest. He gave one of the weakest performances. Not that it was bad. It's just you know, whenever I saw him in the film, it didn't look like he could have carried the film in that sense that Jim Caviezel did. But you know, he was just starting out, of course, Adrian Brody. But you know, all the acting performances really, I can't flaw too much. And just everyone, you know, it's also memorable. It's just part of this, you know, this greater picture, you know, and just this narrative that is just so strong and focused, and so beautiful. Such a beautiful film. The Thin Red Line, 100% plus, tier 3. Now it's not quite, you know, tier 2 or anything like that, or tier 1S. But you know, that's just simply because there's a lot of films that I think are even better than this. And, you know, I connect with even more. But really, this is one of the best war films I've ever seen. And you know, Malick was just it's just perfected this film really. You know, the writing, it's something really when someone directs and writes a film, and you know, such an auteur as well, like Malick is. It's just such an achievement. This film really, it's something you really just have to appreciate really. It's just stunning, you know, and I connected with it on so many levels. It moved me so much, you know, really, really powerful stuff. Very emotional film, and just wonderful from start to finish, really, and just a very spiritual ending as well. It just wraps things up so well, and just leaves it on a note that's so sincere as well. You know, The Thin Red Line, an absolute masterpiece of cinema. Stunning, and thank you, Terrence Malick. And yes, that's the last Malick that I'm reviewing, of course. Voyage of Time is kind of a documentary, so when I see that eventually, which won't be, you know, top priority, I'll be maybe giving my thoughts on that, because I don't review documentaries in that sense that I do with films. I won't be putting in the ranking or anything, you know. But I'll give my thoughts on that eventually. But the ranking of the 8 films of Malick will probably be, you know, in the next few weeks at least. You know, I may even decide to do it tomorrow. It just depends. It really depends. It could be tomorrow. It could be, you know, in a week or so. But yes, thanks for watching my review of Terrence Malick's masterpiece, The Thin Red Line.